Greetings, my name is James Curtis Geis. I've been a history teacher for 20 plus years. I've been writing since 2016. Welcome to Teachers Anonymous. I love my teacher ties and I love my coffee. So, this episode is about my lazy and incompetent and vindictive assistant principal when I was at the High School of Health Careers and Sciences. So I'd been at Park West High School for 7 years, and I was transferred to the High School of Health Careers and Sciences because of this small school movement in the city. 200 new schools were created. They didn't hire new teachers. They just hired like 400 new administrators who don't teach and and don't make class size smaller. But so on my first day I showed up, I had my transfer papers, and they're like, "Who are you?" And I'm like, "I'm James Geist, history teacher. I've been transferred here." And they were so upset. "Why didn't we know about this?" I'm like, "Don't kill the messenger." So, my AP in the spring of 2000, she pushed a special education student off a desk, and it was swept under the rug. Can you imagine if a teacher pushed a student off a desk? What would have happened? See, she and the principal were best buddies, and so nothing happened. And I loved the principal. He was a good guy, but he was suffering dementia, and so as they say, hate the illness, don't hate the person. And so, like, I remember sitting in some meetings with him, and one meeting we were speaking about a student who was deaf, and the principal said, "Oh, you mean the kid who?" And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, you can't do that." And we had another meeting, and in the middle of the meeting, he said, "My mother, I think my mother would be happy if she got more sex." And it was like the king who didn't have any clothing, right? Everyone just sat there and didn't say a word. I couldn't believe it. So that was my situation. And so in the fall of 2008, she came up with this program to have student mentors, and the idea was, it's going to make the life of teachers easier. So, I guess kids who wanted to be teachers, it's a good experience. But she would give the material to the kids 10 minutes before class, and there were a couple of times where she didn't even give the material to the kids. So kids would come in, the mentor, and within 10 minutes they'd be done, and then they'd look at me like, "Help," and I'd say, "Okay, I got it." So I just prepared a lesson for those periods because I knew the kids would only go for 15 minutes, 10 minutes, maybe 15 minutes. And then also the students were mean to them, which was terrible. Imagine the courage it takes to go up in front of your peers and try to teach. I held these kids in high regard, but so that didn't work out. And then the assistant principal in January of 2008, she said, we had a department meeting. I want all the history teachers to come up with 10 ideas to improve the department, our classes, our region scores. So I took it seriously, thought about it, did research, wrote up my ideas. I'm probably sure I even have more than 10 ideas. We're going to meet next week at the same time. So I keep looking for this email, never get an email. So I go to her office and say, are we going to meet to talk about these ideas? We're not going to meet. So again, why did we even have the meeting if we weren't going to discuss these ideas? A period, 45, 50 minutes wasted that I could have used to work on lesson plans. So then she came in my room in March of 2009 and said, I'd like a bulletin board over there, but I'm going to have the secretary put it up. I'm like, okay, great. She comes in a couple days later, "Where's the bulletin board?" I said, "I don't know, ask the secretary." She goes, "No, you need to put up a bulletin board." Okay, so later that day, put up a bulletin board. She comes in the next day. "Why is the bulletin board on that wall?" "I want the bulletin board on the other wall." So now I got all this student work. I have to move all this stuff to the other wall. Then she comes in the next day and goes, "Why'd you move the bulletin board? You didn't have to move the bulletin board." So, teaching's hard enough as it is, and then to have a assistant principal, your boss, harassing you, making your life more difficult. I don't know why she didn't. I'm a nice guy. I don't know why she didn't like me. I mean, I was fairly popular with the teachers. I was fairly popular with the students, popular with my wife, popular with a lot of people, except the person who had control over my life. And so in September of 2010, she asked the department to create an assessment test. We want to improve the Regents scores. You know, it was a state test, the Regents, and we had it for U.S. history, for global history. So there were like 50 multiple choice questions. There were like 5 DBQ questions, which are document-based questions. They'd put up a document with 1 or 2 questions. So if you could read, there were usually 5 to 10 answers that would be correct. So you could do that. And then lastly were 2 essays. And so I did a lot of work with my kids on essay writing because they did not like writing. Every test I gave was an essay test because if I gave it in class, they wouldn't do it. The only way I could get them to write is I had to put it in test form. So we got to take time to create the test. We give the test in class. Then we have to correct the test, and we give it to the assistant principal. So, essentially that's 4 or 5 hours for this assessment test. And then a couple months goes by, and I said, hey, where's the data? How are we going to improve the Regents? Oh, it was just too much work. It was too much data. Again, 4 to 5 hours of the history teacher's lives wasted where we could have prepared ourselves to be better teachers. And then 2010, she was just constantly monitoring me, coming into the room, walking around with her clipboard, taking notes. And I had 2 young ladies, Catherine and Chris Angel, and they're like, why is this lady always coming in your room? What's her problem? She's such a witch. But, they didn't call her a witch. So they knew what was going on. And then the art teacher, Miss Silver, she's like, I don't know why your boss keeps going after you. She said, the students, when I hear them in my class, they talk about they like your class, they're learning, you're funny. And she said, Mr. Geis, you're usually one of the first people in the building. You're always smiling. You're always happy. And I just want to let you know that the kids enjoy your class. So I was so grateful that she told me that. I mean, if you want to know who teaches, you ask the students. They'll tell you who's a good teacher, and they'll tell you who's a bum, who doesn't teach. So September 11, 2011, I had prepared a test, and she goes, I want to see your test. Okay. I don't like this test. You need to rewrite it. Well, my test was the next day, so I rewrote it. I went to her office in the morning, gave her the test, and she goes, no, I'm not happy with this. You have to rewrite it. And I go, well, I'm really sorry, but I'm giving the test today. I said, I don't have another lesson planned for today. Today was the test. So I'm giving the test. And she said, well, if you give that test, you're getting a write-up. So I was charged with insubordination. Never in all my years of teaching at that point, it would have been about 10 years that I have an assistant principal ask me to rewrite a test. So she asked us to do another assessment test in 2012. It was the same thing, another 4 to 5 hours in this assessment test. And then I said, well, where's the data? And she said, oh, Hurricane Sandy happened. So yeah, I don't have any data. I'm telling you, she was lazy. She was incompetent. And then in February 2012, she had made suggestions to me, and I implemented all these suggestions. And then I came to find out, not till after my arbitration, because it's very tough to get people to testify for you because they don't want to put a target on their back. I had asked an administrator. She's like, oh, administrators can't testify against other administrators. I asked some of the teachers. Is like, she's our boss. We can't testify. And I came to find out she was asking me to do things that she wasn't asking the other teachers to do. For example, you need to put up timelines. She didn't ask other teachers to do that. She said, you need to put up word walls in your room. She didn't ask the other teachers to do that. And then I found out that some of the teachers, she would ask them for the lesson, and she wouldn't meet with them for a post-observation meeting. She didn't even observe them. She just wrote up a report based on the lesson for the teachers she was buddies with. So, I mean, that's malfeasance. You can't do that, but she did it. And so in 2012, I was voted Teacher of the Year. And see, she wouldn't come and observe me anymore because I'd implemented all these changes she asked me to do, and I didn't know that I had a 30/20 coming up, that she was going to have this hearing to try to get me fired. She purposely did not come to my class because then she would have had a report that I implemented all the stuff that she asked me to do. Like, she asked me to quantify the do now, which I did. She asked me to do pre-reading questions, which I did. I had been giving notes, and she wanted me to, instead of having the kids copy notes, I ended, and for me it was a way of getting them to read, to write. It's kinesthetic. So in other words, I had, I'd give them mini lesson. There would be reading, there would be book work, there would be group work, and then we'd have the summary question at the end. But it was a way of covering the same material 3 to 4 to 5 different ways to get this information in their head so that they could pass the Regents exam. That was my system, and my scores were 5% higher than the rest of the department for the Regents exam. So she went crazy when I was voted Teacher of the Year in 2012, and that's the year she made the decision to file a 30/20 against me, and that's the famous rubber room, which will be my next video, and it really was one of the worst experiences of my life. So, and this was a person who I would go to her office, and almost every third time I was there, she was on the phone with a travel agent, making plans for her next trip. So obviously, that's why she didn't have time to observe, actually observe other teachers. She had time to come to my room all the time, and then I'll talk about in the next video about all the contractual violations that happened that was not honored by the principal or the assistant principal. So, yeah, that is stories of Assistant Principal Greenblatt's poor leadership skills. So, thanks for listening, and God bless you and all humans and ETs. All my books are on Amazon, and thank you so much for listening.